Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. Let's talk about triggers.
Well, you said we hadn't talked about triggers. I thought we did, so.
We've talked about triggers, but we haven't done an episode about triggers. And it's a topic that really needs an episode because even after you've been through therapy, after you've recovered, after you've been through a lot of healing, there's triggers linger. They sneak up on you.
They do, and they're layered.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, you're overreacting or you're totally shutting down when something reminds you. And if you read the book Blink, it talks about how we see things that we don't really see. So in our peripheral, and that happened to me one day. I saw something, but I didn't really see it. But my brain saw it, but it wasn't in my direct sight. And I found myself just getting anxious. And then when I kind of calmed myself down because I realized something must have triggered me. So then I looked around and I saw what it was. And so we are so sensitive because we have these body memories. And whenever somebody like really overreacts to something, it's a lot of times it's because something has triggered them.
It's an association. I mean, and we learn these associations, from our history, from our childhood, from what happened to us. We learn these associations, but they're internalized. You don't realize you have these associations.
A color. It could be a color.
There's a lot of triggers. There's like smells for me are a big trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Colors.
No, yeah. Colors. And when I was working with the foster care system, they had this movie and the girl was in a foster home and it was a good one. They were really bonding. Well, the foster mom bought her a dress. Well, the whole reason she ended up in foster care in the end was the parents fought so much and the last fight was over a dress.
Oh.
So here she does this nice thing, gives her a dress, and then the girl just,
freaks out,
throws it down, stomps on it, and leaves. So people don't understand. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And to us, we're just reacting versus acting. And as we get more healing, we do act more, but still we get caught off guard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's the key to triggers is realizing you're reacting, realizing that it's an irrational reaction. It's something that you have no control over almost. You feel like you have no control over. And then when that happens, you have to stop and breathe, look around, count to 10, do the things to calm yourself down, because when you find yourself just irrationally reacting, generally it's a trigger.
Right.
And we don't always know what that trigger is until we look around, till we stop, for me, smells. I had a hard time in high school because the smell of men's sweat, the smell of sweat just
set you off.
Oh yeah. And I still am aware of it, but it doesn't trigger me because I'm aware, but back in high school, going to gym was a nightmare. Man. And it wasn't just the kids dressing and undressing and so forth. It was the smell of sweat would just send me spiraling. And I had a hard time. And at that time, I had no idea what my problem was, except I just hated gym. And I loved being active. It was just
When did you make the connection?
Years later. Well, I realized I also hated going to the barber, hated going to the doctor, hated going to the dentist. And it wasn't until I got a female barber, I got a hairdresser, and I realized, well, this doesn't bug me.
Interesting.
I'm not having a problem. And then my doctor retired, so I had to get another doctor, and I got a woman doctor, and I didn't have the issues anymore. And I started realizing, that makes sense. I'm in a room in close proximity with someone I don't really know who's a man, and I'm all freaked out. Well, of course. But I realized part of it, one of the biggest triggers for me was just smelling a man that close to me, having that scent, and I work in construction. So a lot of times I'm around men that are sweaty and, and it's like, I realize that does put me on edge sometimes.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, there's this whole thing of the amygdala, and when we feel threatened, it's the flight or fight. But now they're saying fight, flight, or freeze, that there's actually three things. And I like that because for me, I freeze. I will get paralyzed. I can't move. I can't think. I don't know what to do. I don't even know what's happening. Now I know enough to think about it and go, something's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so then I can calm myself because I go, it's from the past. It's not happening now.
Yeah.
It's something that I've either seen or heard or, like you say, smelled, that it happens and you don't go, oh, that smells like vanilla. That reminds, you don't do that because it's so far we've pushed and pushed and pushed it away.
Yeah. And freeze is, definitely a response. I know for me, it was often freeze. And even like the tone of men's voices sometimes, working in construction when men are just like gruff and pissed off or something, it would trigger me because my father had a real violent temper. He was really angry a lot of times, and that would just trigger me. Hearing someone just being, that way, I would freeze. I would get that reaction of just panicking and not knowing what to do and then doing nothing.
Right. So I swim with my sister, and it's a master's class. So a lot of people are lap swimming, but there's a teacher, and then she'll talk to someone and he'll yell back. And so sometimes there's a lot of yelling, and it's not mean. It's just, I can't hear you yelling. But when I'm swimming, I hear that yelling and I get so anxious. And until I figured out it was the yelling, and, they're just they're just, keep your arms up, move your, that kind of yelling. But I'm hearing it, and I'm hearing it underwater, and I'm just I'm like ready to get out of the pool until I finally recognized what was happening. But I couldn't figure out why I just needed to get out of the pool. And then it was like, oh, because they're yelling, and they don't do it every day. So that's why I think it was daily, but it's like sometimes, so maybe they have like a competition Friday or something where they race a little. And so, and that was one of those things. I was like, something was making me anxious. I mean, you're swimming, it's so serene. And then all of a sudden, I'm just like, so even though I would call myself healed to the most part, there's always going to be things.
Yeah. And the reason we're talking about triggers is it's so important to realize that you can recognize your triggers and then address them in a way so you're not freezing or fleeing or fighting every time. You can know that feeling that you're being triggered and know, okay, if I count to 10, if I breathe, if I realize I don't have to react to this, it's not really a fight or flight issue.
Yeah. Well, I work with a lot of people who are addicted to drugs. They're not using at the time, but they have so many triggers, and they could be walking or on the bus going through a certain area. And so triggers is a thing that a lot of people with different situations deal with. And I feel like the most important thing is that, like you said in the beginning, when you feel yourself starting to overreact, or, for some of us, we're parents and we yell. Maybe we yell at our kids and they're like looking at us like, why are you yelling? We didn't do anything, because something happened, a noise, a fight, something that triggered us, and then we're out of control. And so it's finding that, recognizing it, and taking a step back and going, I can solve this. I can figure this out.
It takes a lot of examination. You have to pay attention. And at the beginning, for me, it was paying attention to when I was being triggered. And I didn't actually have much control over the trigger then, but I was just like, what is going on?
Right.
And then you start to realize it, and then you can start getting control over it.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that the triggers go away. You'll still have the triggers, but you get more control.
One day I heard something on the news. It didn't click with me that that's what happened. And I started pacing my house. I was a mom. I had little kids, and I was just walking around my house, and I didn't know what was wrong, but I couldn't sit down. I couldn't think. I didn't know what was going on. And it took me almost 2 days to figure out that it was something that I heard on the news. Yeah. And now I will catch those so much quicker. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean I don't have the triggers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It means I see it, I hear it, and I'm able to manage it because I've done the self-reflection.
Yeah, I wish I could say triggers go away, but our bodies have these associations. We learn them, and it's internalized. It's something that our body, our brain reacts without us knowing about it.
Often somebody will be acting like a certain way, and it seems like, oh, every year they act this way. And all of a sudden, you ask them, what happened this time of year? And they're like, what? And when they think about it, there was a trauma. Yeah. And so they're acting like jerks or whatever, and they don't even know it. Yeah. And I often, with my clients, if they say like someone in their household, maybe their spouse is like, every year at this time, I say, ask them what happened.
Yeah, ask them about their childhood. Was there something that, for me, summers, I would get anxious and irritable. And I know it began, I recognize this now, but I know it was happening even in school. When I was in school, at the end of the year, I'd get anxious and irritable and depressed. Yeah. Very depressed, because when I was abused, it was basically all summer long.
Right, home and no supervision.
Yeah, and so I recognized internally that summer wasn't safe. And
Isn't that interesting? That summer wasn't safe.
Yeah, and I love summer now. Yeah. And I don't have that dread when summer comes like I used to, but I did. I used to have the dread of summer. And most people, like my wife, it's the dread of winter because, she kind of has this seasonal disorder. But for me, it used to be the dread of summer, which, people didn't get.
Yeah, for me, it was Halloween, and I didn't even know that I behaved a certain way until my former college roommate, who's just my friend now. I mean, we see each other all the time, but she noticed that I couldn't handle fall, so she bought me a bunch of decorations, fall decorations, and said, "You've got to learn to love fall." And she didn't even know that it wasn't until she did that I went, "Oh, I hate fall. Why do I hate fall?" Yeah. And then I did the self-reflection, and then I could understand it, and now I love the fall.
Yeah, I've always loved Halloween, and that's funny because that's one of my favorite holidays and times of year, and is the fall and Halloween. But part of it I remember because when I was a kid, I got to dress up. I got to be something else. And I always loved trying to be something else. And I looked, I would look forward to it every year as a kid, what I was going to dress up like and be something else.
Really? Now, see, I have an issue because I don't like not knowing who someone is. And even now with masks, this has been a trigger for me because I don't know who people are. Mm-hmm. And I think my hypervigilance is part of, I recognize people, I know people's names. And so to not be sure who they are has been really, I think it's difficult for everyone, but for me, it's almost stirring up trauma because it's like, I need to know who you are. Yeah. Because you might hurt me or I'm not sure. But again, it's triggering a lot of stuff. And I can't tell if you're smiling or you're mad. And I think part of that comes from a mentally ill mom because I never knew. I never knew when I woke up, is she going to be crazy? Is she going to be nice? Is she going to be, you just never know what every day is going to hold.
You were probably relying on those visual cues to know what her state of mind was going to be. Yeah. And now that you can't see those visual cues, you're panicking because you don't know how these people are going to be.
Right. And that's where the little kid, the child that's left behind, that's where she comes out because she's like, all of a sudden you're back to that time frame. Yeah. You're back that many years ago. And so the thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, we talked about doing the work and telling the story. And the thing is as hard as it is, you healing yourself, telling your story, doing the work, as hard as it is going to make your life better. Yeah. Because otherwise you're just reacting to so many things. It's so exhausting.
It is. And sometimes, you're shutting down.
Right.
And if you're, married, have kids, so forth, you're shutting down with your family, you're shutting down with your kids. Mm-hmm. there's so many ways I recognize that I shut down or I disassociated or I reacted just completely out of proportion to what
Right.
is going on.
Yeah.
And now I recognize it when I start to do that, and I still do sometimes, but now I recognize it. I go, okay, there's something going on. And that's the thing with triggers is even now sometimes I get triggered and I don't really realize what it was until later afterwards. But at least I recognize I'm being triggered, and I'm able to calm myself down and kind of get a grip on myself. But recently I had to go to a doctor, and the only doctor I could go to was a male doctor. Well, that's not easy for me. Well, after going to the doctor, and I prepared myself for it, I'm able to do it now. I get it. So I was aware that this was an issue, that I had to, be ready. But after I came home from the doctor, for hours, I was just in a bad mood and crabby and snappy, and we had a friend over, and I just wasn't in the mood to socialize. I think it was obvious, and I didn't realize I was reacting to what I had been through afterwards. It's had residual effect on me. I was just pissy.
Right. Well, often we have to be strong for the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I built myself up. I got all ready. I dealt with it. I didn't have a problem at the doctor. I was okay. And I came home and was an asshole, basically.
Well, I love what your wife says. She's like, I don't know if he was shutting down or if he's being a jerk.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes I don't either. But the big picture here is, we have triggers. Sometimes we're aware. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes other people are more aware of them
the people
than
we
we
live
are.
with.
But I think the big picture here is, the work is find out what it is. And then the way you do that is you have to pay attention when you're reacting, when you're having this reaction, when you're, shutting down or being just completely upset. Just pay attention and try to look back and see what could have led to this and how, it develops. And the reason for it is so you will be more aware in the future, so you can actually handle it better.
And everybody's trigger is different. And one of the things that helps a lot is if you journal, because if you had been journaling, huge. You would probably look back and go, oh, the doctor, because what happened was you did the due diligence. You paid attention, you were aware, but then you didn't realize the letdown. And I think I've seen that with you before. Mm-hmm. For instance, when you started the podcast, it stirred some things. And so I think it's like if you can keep a journal or even on a calendar, mark things that are hard for you so that you might be able to look back. Because when you're in that state, you can't think, you can't remember. Unless somebody says, okay, listen, what's been going on with, if you have a spouse or a counselor. And the fact that they're so different and there's different triggers, it's not always, like the one that happened to me that day. I've never seen anything like that again. It was just a little boy and a girl, but it was what they were wearing. And, it was just like they were somewhere they shouldn't be. I mean, everything was just screaming to me, danger, danger.
Yeah. Well, and even just today, Sharna was talking about something that was in the news about a girl that was a survivor, and she was commenting on the article, and just what she said triggered this reaction in me, and I completely recognized it at the time. I was like completely aware of, okay, I'm being triggered, and this is why, and I knew it all at the time, but it's only because I've been paying attention and I recognized that, okay, sometimes when people say things about survivors or questioning survivors, or they
use the word rape or talk about so and so got raped, and it brings out. So what did you do? You realized you were getting triggered, so what did you do?
I basically didn't react. I don't know how else to put it. I felt myself wanting to react, and I realized, okay, this isn't about her. This isn't, this is just my reaction that really isn't relevant to what she said or what was going on. It just my trigger.
Yeah.
And so I just said, I don't need to react to this. And I was able, and I don't have because it was a thoughtful thing, I don't have the aftermath, the residual.
Because you paid attention and you nipped it in the bud.
And that's how the process helps you.
Yeah.
by paying attention, knowing when it's happening, recognizing it when it happens, and paying attention to what triggers you. And then you realize that you don't have to go there necessarily.
Right. That you're not helpless. You're an adult. You know, all those things that you need to remember, because a trigger takes us back and makes us think we're children. So it's kind of like, I'm an adult. I can choose not to listen to this. I can choose to say something rather than, you know, just say, don't talk about that, or however, I don't know what a reaction for you would look like. But, or just totally go inside yourself and not respond at all.
It's not easy, but the part I like best is now I'm able to spot my triggers before they happen. I'm able to spot the triggers as they're happening. And then also after they happen, I can look and say, okay, well, that's a new trigger. Oh boy, add that to the collection. You know, they will keep surprising you. You find out that there's all kinds of triggers because we do internalize it. Our when you're young, when you're being abused, when things are happening to you, your body has these associations, your mind has these associations, but you don't recognize them mentally. You don't see them.
A good example of that is being seen and heard. So you might be at work and you're not being heard. And so, you know, you might overreact because it's that trigger. And you overreact more than needed for not being heard. Because as adults, we can say, you know, I need you to listen to me or whatever. But so it's things like that, you know, when we are not valued, that will trigger us. When people treat us like we're not important. Yeah.
I have really bad abandonment issues because my dad left when I was really young, and my mom had to go to work a lot, and she wasn't around a lot. So I have a lot of abandonment issues, and those are hard as far as the triggers because I don't recognize them at once. There's a lot of times where I'll just be really upset and not recognize it for a while, and then I'm like, oh, yeah. I get it now. Yeah. And so it isn't easy, but this is, you know, one of the most important tools for us is to recognize our triggers and to gain more control over them.
Yeah. And give yourself grace when you don't. But that feeling of, okay, I got this, that's a great feeling.
Yeah, because when you do start to get control, when you do start to understand your triggers, it really changes how you deal with things enormously.
Because you're not helpless. So you're not...
And your relationships with people change a lot. They improve a lot. And you don't feel as helpless. You don't feel so lost and out of control.
Yeah.
And also, I know for me, I know you probably experienced this with the recovery people. For me, my reaction to triggers was often to use drugs or alcohol just to numb that down. And so I have a lot more freedom now because I don't just resort to whatever it is to, you know, numb myself, to get rid of that feeling that I had.
One gal that I know, she is in a recovery home and there's a lot of people in there. So her roommate happened to have a TV. Well, she would watch these horrible movies, you know, with violence. And I finally told her, I go, you can't. You cannot be falling asleep to that. And so she was able to change rooms, but she didn't understand. She knew she didn't like it, but she didn't understand that she was re-traumatizing herself every night with that, you know.
The horror.
Yeah. So... you know, paying attention to what you're watching, what you're around, you know, we have choices now. And if somebody's going to watch a movie that's causing us stress, we can leave the room.
Yeah.
You know, or ask them to turn it off. We don't have to just put up with it.
Well, and also just being aware of not putting yourself in the situations. Like for me, you know, not going to a male barber. Not going to a male doctor. Those, I mean, I'm able to do it when it's necessary. But I don't have to, so I don't put myself in those situations.
I think sometimes we think for healing that we have to be able to overcome those. So for me, I just don't I can't walk alone on the street.
Yeah.
Like even in my neighborhood, I have a great neighborhood. But for me, if I'm with 3 or 4 people, I can feel safe. But even the middle of the day, walking by myself, you know, I just don't think I'm ever going to get to the point where I'm going to do that and I don't need to do it. So why try? Why put all this effort into trying?
Yeah.
Because I think I should be okay with it when I don't need to be okay with it.
Yeah. If that is an association that you always have.
Yeah.
be aware of it and, take the steps to avoid those situations because we don't have to put ourselves through it.
Right.
And I don't, for me, I avoid them when I can.
Right. Well, and that's what we tell the drug addicts, don't go down to the old stomping grounds. And it really is the same thing. It's like, and sometimes there will be somebody that looks like somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be somebody that you like a lot, but, it's like you just don't have to be around that.
Yeah.
And and once you recognize things, then you can, sometimes some of those things will slough off. But the biggest thing is that whole overreacting, fight or flight or freeze, and this recognizing that you're in a state and that you want to get yourself out of that state.
Yeah. So first you recognize that you're being triggered and how you're being triggered or what's causing it. Then you recognize, okay, you don't have to react. And then you pay attention to when this happens. And even like the seasonal triggers for me, that one took me a while because it just doesn't seem like that would be a trigger.
Right.
But every year, every year I had a hard time. Some people it's holidays.
Right.
If you always hate Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or something, what's going on there? Is there something that happened? Is there something else that, it's not necessarily the holiday, it's the association with that something that happened.
Right. And find someone to talk to, because sometimes if you get a counselor, you can kind of get to the bottom of it once you start to recognize it.
Yeah.
You might say, I absolutely don't know what triggered me, but here I was in this place doing this thing. And even if you don't really recognize what the trigger is, but you recognize that you were triggered, that's huge.
Yeah.
You will discover what the triggers are the more you recognize that you're getting triggered.
Yeah. And it can be visible thing, like something you see. It could be something you hear. It can be, all your senses are tuned in. And sometimes it's smell, like for me, or sometimes it sounds like someone yelling. It can be very different every time.
Right.
And I know I have a collection of triggers, so I always kind of have to figure out sometimes. Sometimes it's really obvious, and sometimes it's like, I have no idea what just triggered me. Yeah. I'm going to try and think about and just reflect on it for a little while because I know I got triggered.
Yeah. So rather than taking it out on someone, which we do when we don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
We might take it out on our spouse or our children, and they don't deserve that. We didn't deserve it, but now we're becoming the perpetrator when we are overreacting and raging at something that they didn't do because we got triggered.
Or even like shutting down, because I know for my wife, when I shut down, she feels like it's passive aggressive. She thinks I'm being passive aggressive, and I'm not. I'm just shutting down. And it's not intentionally to hurt or control or, because I'm mad at her. It's just I'm shutting down, And so it's important to recognize how you react to triggers and realize that you can control that. You can stop it. It's not always easy, but you can, if you start recognizing, then you can start controlling it.
Yeah.
And it will improve your life so much. I know for me it has.
Yeah. So triggers.
They're so much fun. We all have a collection of them, but it's just part of our history.
Right.
And we can't help it.
Yeah, and it's part of our growth. And today I had to fill out something at work, and it's like, what are you contributing, or what do you plan on contributing? And I wrote down, I'm a lifelong learner. And when you're in recovery, you are recovering, but you don't recover. And so we always want to be learning and growing. And it's so good for our brain anyway.
Yeah.
But often it's easy to just kind of shut down and not want to see anything or look at anything. But reading books, even if it's not about that, but getting your mind active is just so helpful, because when we get stagnant, when we get into the freeze, we may not realize that what we're dwelling on, but we are. And so being, active, get up, move if you need to, but make it your goal to just be learning.
Yeah.
Growing and learning.
And paying attention, learning about yourself. I know for me, sometimes after I'm been triggered and I realize it and I'm dealing with the residual trigger, I have to take care of myself because I've had this emotional roller coaster. And so, I do something for myself.
Self-care.
Self-care. Because it's hard on you to have a trigger. Sometimes it can be really hard. It can really upset you, really send you spinning. And even now when I've got control over it, I kind of recognize it, see it happening, don't react, kind of get over it. But even afterwards, I'm a little, wow, that was rough. And so I try and take care of myself afterwards, try and, be really good to myself and don't, because it's easy for us to kind of force our way through things.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to have that self-care after we've been triggered, just to do something nice, take a bath, do something relaxing, read a really good book, just to kind of take your mind off of it, something that you can recover, something that, restores you.
Yeah, it fills your cup.
Because
for some people, it's exercise. It's
for
moving,
me, it's exercise a lot of times, So... But I think the keys are to recognize when you're having that trigger and then recognize what your reaction is and then try to figure out what caused the trigger and be aware of how that happened and how you can avoid it in the future. And also, if it's not avoidable, how you can
bounce back quicker.
Yeah, bounce back, or even just when you know you're being triggered, not react, but find a way of acting on it, acting through or getting through it.
Yeah.
What is it that you can do that, do you stop, count to 10 or take a deep breath or even just look up in the sky if you're outside or, just do something to distract you from the trigger.
Yeah.
Because we can all deal with them. It is possible to control our reactions to the triggers. We can't control the triggers. They come. Yeah, but you can control how you react and how we act after the trigger.
Right. And when we do, it's better for the people that we live with the people that we're around. And
people we work for or work with.
And, we often hear that bullies are bullied at home or they have bad situations.
Yeah.
And it's like, then they're acting out and then they're making everyone's life miserable and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And so the sooner that we get a grip on it, the sooner everyone around us is going to benefit as well.
Yeah, it's so important because we can't control what happened to us, but we can control how we deal with it now. And that's the important part. And especially if we are in relationships. And, we want to have healthy relationships. It's really hard when you're just bouncing around like a ping pong because you're reacting all the time.
Right.
So
remember, fight, flight, or freeze.
Or freeze.
If you're doing that, something's up.
Yeah. Stop, count to 10, take a few deep breaths.
There's also the 4x4 breathing. I use that a lot. It's where you breathe in, count to 4, hold it, count to 4, and then breathe out. So you breathe in through your nose, hold it, and then out through your mouth, and you count to 4 each time. And you do that 5 or 6 times. And it is, when people say just breathe, when you're getting oxygen in, it seriously.
Well, also you're consciously thinking about your breathing.
Exactly.
So you've taken your brain out of this react mode.
Exactly.
And you're doing an action that you're consciously thinking about and, mindful of. So your mind isn't in this fight or flight or freeze mode. It's thinking about something else. And that gives you the time to kind of regain composure and think about what's going on and get a grip on it. And I think that's really helpful as far as dealing with triggers. It's just, okay, I'm being triggered. What's going on?
Right. And the good news is it gets better. It doesn't go away. It gets better. It gets different. You catch on quicker, and sometimes you've found things that you can avoid that is really wonderful. Because if it's something that's like in your near environment and you can just get rid of it, maybe it's a picture, that you don't even realize. You're walking by it every day and, you don't even realize.
But you're associating with it with something, and it's like you don't realize that it's just triggering you every time. Yeah, sometimes it really can change your life.
And we put up with so much. Right? Because we're survivors. And so other people might have something that would cause them grief and they get rid of it in a heartbeat. Not us. We're just going to keep doing it and doing it because we're survivors and we can put up with a lot. And I think that that's beautiful in a way, but it's terrible in a way because, there's people that maybe should leave relationships, but they stay longer because they're a survivor and they're going to tough it out. So, giving yourself some grace and allowing yourself to clean out, clean things up, get rid rid of stuff that's going to cause you grief.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as survivors, we don't realize we have a choice. We
Right.
do have that choice to avoid the situation or avoid the people, avoid the things that cause us grief, that causes triggers, because that's just the way it was.
Right.
So we think that's the way it's always going to
Right.
be, or that's just what we have to deal with in life. And so once you start to recognize these triggers and start to realize that, they're causing you grief in your life and you can avoid them, you have a choice.
For me, I couldn't speak up. And so I remember with my roommates, there was something that was bothering me. And someone said, well, why don't you just talk to them about it? And I go, because they won't care. I just assumed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my pattern. And so when I started to learn that it doesn't matter if they don't care, it matters to me and I can speak up.
Yeah.
But, all these stories you tell yourself to, just be quiet, don't matter, don't make a difference, don't make waves. And so as we learn to speak up, even though it's very foreign, then, that's going to help empower us as well.
Yeah, I know. For me, anger was a really scary thing. So I never lost my temper. For a long time, I would bottle it up. I would never go there. I would never, because I thought I would just explode because of all the anger I had inside, that rage.
Right.
But also because I had experienced violent anger. And it was terrifying to me. And it wasn't until I got through quite a bit of therapy that I could approach anger and be angry and express anger in a way that wasn't like destructive, that wasn't like, an exploding, and when you're bottling up your emotions, they all get bottled up.
Right.
So when you're bottling up your anger, you're also bottling up all of the other emotions that really matter.
Yeah.
And you have to learn that you can express emotions and actually, to enjoy those emotional times, to enjoy your emotions.
Something my girls say to me a lot is when they get off drugs, they go, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling, I don't like this. I'm feeling things because, they've stuffed and then they use alcohol and drugs. And I'm just like, feel it, it's like, just feel those feelings.
Feel life. I mean, and it's scary at first when you first go into therapy and you first, started doing this. It was very scary for me. I didn't like experiencing feelings. Because I was afraid of them.
Right, we're not supposed to be mad. We're not supposed to be sad.
Yeah, or angry for me. But now, I have healthy emotions, and it really makes a difference because I experienced the full range of emotions, whereas before I was like just the tip of the emotions, nothing else, just the tip of them.
And, when we do that, it affects our body.
Yeah.
It seriously does. And people that are abused young, if they don't face their issues and deal with it, a lot of times they have bladder issues because they will hold it and hold it. Yeah. And so there's all these things that happen to our body when we internalize all of this. Mm-hmm. And so, it's healing the whole body.
Yeah, because our whole body, our whole being has been affected.
Yeah. So if you're feeling those triggers, now you've got a few tools, and you can also look online. You can get a counselor, talk to someone. But we just like for a long time I didn't know that that's what was happening. And so when I never heard the word trigger until probably 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, the more that we can say about what we went through, hopefully it will help. And then hopefully then you can help somebody else.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, thank you for all your blessings. And I pray that you would be there when people are feeling triggered, that you would give them the time to have grace, that you would be present in their life to help them through these triggers, to help them recognize and understand and control their triggers. And Lord, I just pray you would also forgive them for their reactions, because I know I feel bad when I react. and I feel guilty about how I react. But you know, Lord, that you know our hearts, and you know that when we're triggered, we can't always control our reactions. And it's not always easy for us, even afterwards, when we feel guilty about it. And Lord, I just pray you would help them to understand them and also find a way to control them and not feel so guilty about having triggers, because I don't think everyone actually knows what their triggers are. And I know I'm still surprised sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I know I react and then I feel bad about it, Lord. And I just pray you would help them to feel forgiven about that. And I just thank you for your presence in our lives, Lord, in your name.
Father, I just thank you so much for the opportunity to heal. And Lord, we never deserve what we went through, but you are such a good God. And I just pray that as we walk through healing, you will just be real to us, help us to feel your comfort. Lord, I know I just begged you to show me everything, and you were so gracious not to let me take baby steps. And so I ask that, Lord, that little by little, we recognize new things, that we can continue to grow and to learn and become better people. And Lord, those things that cause us grief that we hold inside, that we'll figure out how to let them out and how to be more real about who we are, be able to speak up in love and become that person that you created us to be, Lord, because that's what we know. Whatever we're here for, it doesn't matter what's happened to us. It doesn't matter how many times we feel like we failed, that your will be done in us and through us. It's never too late. We've never missed the mark, that you're always there. And I'm so grateful for that. In your Son's holy name.
Amen.
Amen.